Hi everyone, I'm Natasha Natarajan, the creator of FML Comics, and I'm excited to be doing a short interview for Good Comics today. I've brought my zine box, which is what I would usually take to zine fairs. I found it last summer on Facebook Marketplace. It's a briefcase that's been plastered, like collaged, and actually inside it is old comics in French. So it is my prized possession. And also, this is my flatmate's really pristine yellow sofa, which actually matches the cover of the book, which is a super exciting feature. I'm desperately trying not to mark it in any way. So, fingers crossed, there will be no tea or coffee drunk during this interview. So, 26, Natasha, and angst, self awareness, and humour. When I look back on it, it wasn't so easy to see at the time, but in my late teens and early 20s, mid 20s, I was I carried a lot of shame about like experiences, like interpersonal interactions, getting too drunk, getting really drunk, um, just general things like that. And I guess you could now call it anxiety, but at the time that word wasn't being used in mainstream settings that much. I didn't really have a word for it, but I'd often like retell funny moments that were actually based on anxieties, but it was actually kind of funny to talk about my internal shame, and people laughed along with me and things. So it's kind of a core feature of my personality to be funny and talk about my anxiety in my 20s. So it's not surprising then that that's what I started drawing about when I first started drawing my comics. Um, I was in Copenhagen at the time, and I had I worked at this music venue, or I volunteered at this world music venue, and there was this sound engineer guy who I just started obsessing about, which is also something I did in my 20s. I'd find some like random person that I didn't really know very well, but was like somehow in my periphery, and I'd start just fangirling about them. And so the first comic I doodled about, which I've actually posted on my Instagram, there's like a torn piece of paper with a doodle of uh, a comic, I guess you could call it, but it looks not like the comics I make now. But anyway, it was about this situation in which I'd gotten really drunk and I'd bumped into him at a pub in Copenhagen, and I'd shared this really awkward conversation with him that I couldn't stop thinking about for weeks. I think I told everyone I knew at the time, and that's the situation that I ended up trying to draw, and that became my first comic, Cool Sound Engineer Guy. So yeah, I think it became it became a real relief and catharsis to draw out these moments that I mulled over in my head a lot. I mean, I used to get drunk, really drunk, for example, and the next day just go over and over like everything I'd said and who I'd bumped into and whether or not that had been really embarrassing and blah blah blah. There was all this stuff going on in my mind, and I think drawing comics helped me work through that a bit. And yeah, they were funny. People laughed a lot, and also people were like, "I know that feeling. Been there, done that." Uh, so yes, angst, self-awareness, and humor. I think that covers it. I'm very self-aware. I'm still very self-aware, but maybe not as shameful about it, or like shameful in not such a funny way, in a more serious, hidden way. I don't know. But yeah, that's the beginning of FML Comics in 2016. I really like this question, and it's something that I've thought about a lot while making the book, because putting them all together like that, and I've written chapters to go through um, what was happening in my life. I really see it all in such a different way. Um, there's definitely so much growth. Like, just to follow on kind of from the previous question, my early comics was so much about finding those punchlines in awkward situations and those cringe moments, and that was the way I processed what you could call my anxiety or my shame or whatever was what's happening. Whereas now it's like, it's so difficult, it's so, sorry, different. I mean, I'm not, my comics really aren't as funny anymore. In fact, they're not really funny. They're very philosophical. In fact, I'm not that funny anymore. It's something I often feel sad about. I'm not as funny as I was in my early 20s, and I think my comics really reflect that. I feel like I used to make a lot more jokes and maybe even laugh a lot more. Maybe that's a bit depressing. But yeah, the growth and the differences I see in my comic exactly mirror the growth and developments I see in myself. Um, yeah, like, let me give some examples. So yeah, my early comics, very much about humor, finding punchlines. The last frame was almost always fuck, you know, because it was fuck my life comics. Um, it was about embarrassing, funny stuff. Um, but you know, in the middle in 2018, when I was having my first mental health crisis, things really changed. Like, a lot of the comics were more about internal happenings. There were a lot more thought bubbles. There were a lot more thoughts in general, and often I was the only person in the comics, and I was often like talking to myself or talking to ideas of myself. And then now, when I look at my comics, I often narrate my experiences. They're not just happening. Like my early comics, they're just frame by frame what's happening. There's no narration. But now there's always narration, and sometimes I want to make a comic where I'm just in the moment trying to explain an idea, but I can't do it without narrating it. And somehow I feel like that's maybe also reflects my internal life, that I'm constantly looking at myself doing stuff. I'm not just doing it, not just living in the moment. Yeah, so maybe that's like a more meta philosophical way of looking at it. But also in terms of the content of the comics, early comics very much like about going places, a lot about dating. Yeah, which I'm not doing anymore, so that's obviously different, I guess. But I guess like looking on it as a whole, it really looks like what you imagine someone in their 20s would be going through, this very sort of free, funny, early 20s life, a kind of a quarter life crisis, is that what we call it? That literally happened to me when I was 26, so, or maybe I was 27. Maybe that'll be a quarter of my life. Anyway, and then a sort of more somber philosophical mood from last year onwards. So yeah, those are my jumbled thoughts about my development, but I guess it's interesting. I think everyone experiences this, that the older you get, the more perspective you have on things, and I think it's probably the only thing that I'm looking forward to about growing old is just having this new perspective on yourself. Like, what are all the things I don't know about myself that I'm going to know in 20 or 30 years? It's kind of exciting because there's so many things that I learned, for example, through therapy, that I was like, whoa, I didn't know that. I feel like I've kind of answered this question a little bit in the previous ones, but they are definitely an outlet for me. And when I started them, I had no intention of becoming a comic artist, that I could be a comic artist, that anyone would even read them. When I first started, they were just for me and a couple of friends, so it was just it was just an outlet. I had a lot of fun, and I found it really satisfying to see myself on the page. I think even there's some things that I don't know how to communicate unless I draw them, like a feeling. Um, like there's comics often of like me huddled in a black space thinking things. Like I don't know how to explain that apart from like that. So yeah, I find it really a relief to write down my thoughts. I've always been like that, like writing diaries and writing letters. Sometimes I do this thing where if I'm feeling something strongly about someone, I'll write a letter to them that I never send. So yeah, I certainly wasn't thinking about people reading my comics at the beginning, and they were a huge cathartic experience to like try and let go of some of my anxieties and I guess laugh about them, or I get in some ways to like see them as not that big a deal. And also I get as time went on and people did start seeing them, it became really rewarding to see people connect to them and say like, oh, I felt that, I really get that, or I've been there, I know what you're talking about. So yeah, I suppose, so all of that would, when it was just for myself, I wanted to be honest because it was just for me, there was nobody to lie to. But also I am very honest. I'm a very honest person. My dad is very honest. I can't lie, I just don't like it. It doesn't feel good. I'm not trying to be up myself about it. I really don't like lying. Like, even when someone asks me a question, like, how are you? I find that question so hard sometimes when I'm feeling down. I'd rather not talk to anyone than someone ask me, how are you? And me say, yeah, I'm okay. I hate doing that. I can't explain why. It's not really about lying. It's just that fast, like being something you're not really, it stresses me out. So in a way it's both things. It's definitely also an extension of my honesty. I don't want to lie in my comics. I find it really satisfying to recreate real life in cartoon form. It's just fun, like drawing my own room, and all the clothes I'm wearing I mostly exist unless I'm lazy and I'm like, can we just turn this top black? I don't want to draw this complicated pattern. But yeah, I get satisfaction also out of drawing things as they are. But yeah, I think I say my personality, not to lie. And then the other thing is also that, like I've said, one of the most rewarding things is seeing people resonate with my comics and reaching out to me to say, oh, that's really happened to me. And I've discovered over the years that it's the most painfully honest comics that do that for people. The ones that I'm most scared about writing or sharing are the ones that people really connect to. And I think that is something about being really honest. Like, what do I actually think about this? I know the ones that the thoughts that I feel most shame about are the ones that people really like or really connect to. So now I have a reason also to be honest. It's rewarding to be honest, and I can't be any other way. And yes, I also need to write my comics for my own sanity, although I haven't in a while, because I'm trying to make money. Anyway, next question. So it's an interesting question for me, what I've learned from other comic artists, because when I started writing my comics in 2016, I really didn't know much about comics. I had only really grown up with Archie comics, which were popular in India. My mum had a lot of them in my grandma's house. But other than that, I didn't know much. So when I started doodling them, it was totally just whatever I wanted, whatever pens I had lying around, whatever paper was there. I like stationery, so I had a lot of that kind of stuff. But I really didn't know what I was doing, and I think that really helped me because I had no benchmark for what a comic should look like, and I just sort of went with whatever I wanted. And if I may say so myself, I quite like the childish hand-drawn style that I came up with and have more or less stuck to since I started, in spite of how much I've learnt along the way. So I'm sort of grateful for that ignorance at the time, because I think I easily could have gotten caught up in what they were supposed to look like rather than what I wanted them to look like. But that being said, I did, after I had been making comics for a while, I did start trying to learn more about the medium. I think some of the first comics I rented from the library, I think I literally just went to the library and went to the comic section and looked at what I could find. I was in Copenhagen at the time, and I think what I took was Julie Doucette. I think that's it, actually. I think that was probably a great one to first look at, because her drawings are very unique. They're very unique. It's not something that you could come home and try and replicate. It's like, oh, I really appreciate this art you've made, and I don't know, I want to develop my own artistic expression. So that was good. I also I remember reading Clumsy by a male author, I think. No, it definitely is, but I can't remember his name. But I liked his drawings as well because they were very hand drawn. I think I must have looked at traditional, like, Marvel type of comics, but I knew that I didn't like that style very much. I wanted to draw my comics because I liked drawing and I liked, working with tangible materials. So I didn't want to work on a computer, and anyway I worked on a computer all day, so I didn't want that. And also, just in general, I find traditional comics quite overwhelming. There's like so much going on, I can't focus well, and I find them very long. Yeah, the length overwhelms me. The same goes for graphic novels. It's like I can't, for whatever reason, I can't like pick up a graphic novel and like put a bookmark in, go to sleep and pick it up another day. For some reason with like illustrated things, I need to finish it now. I don't know what it is about the medium. So yeah, early comic days were, I think, mostly like finding things and knowing that I didn't want that. Also because I just started and I was new to drawing, so like seeing a whole massive graphic novel hand drawn, I was like, fuck, I can't do that. It's like intimidating. So I think I got a bit dissuaded by finding inspiration, as it were. But when I moved to Edinburgh and sort of found out about zines and things, that's when it was like, whoa, there's loads of people like me. And I got really inspired by the zine community, I think. Not necessarily in an aesthetic way, but I was more validated by what I was doing, making these small things and like wanting to print them in a small way and sell them at these small things. It's like, at the time I really didn't think I was going to be a published comic artist. Yay! So this is the first zine I ever bought, Facebook Chats with Women. It was actually in a bookstore. I didn't know about zines at the time. I just bought it because I liked it. But it's got these great illustrations. And Clara, who makes it, actually lives in London, and I got to meet her, which was amazing. But yeah, things like this were like, oh, okay, like people are making little things. I can make little things out of my comics. I don't remember exactly how I found this, but these diary comics by Rita Sapinor in America. I think I probably got into a lot of internet rabbit holes and found things. I wasn't on Instagram for a really long time, so I involved research finding comics. But stuff like this was very inspiring because I was like, oh, there's people out there doing stuff like me, and I guess people want to read it. So yeah, that was really important to find other people doing similar things and to find community. There's these diary comics by more brown girl diary comics, which are amazing. Love them. Drawings of aunties. Don't think I hadn't seen that many drawings of aunties. That's nice. I love Jennifer Camper's comics. Been really important to me, feminist or not. Dykes to Watch Out For. She wrote that book. Stuff like this, quite like simple feminist, funny things. Like, oh yeah, I'm onto that too. Yay. I love this little zine by Rachel House. It's very small. It has this amazing panel. There's no such thing as a bad drawing. Your drawing only has to be strong enough to carry the idea. Beautiful. Then there were these like A4 zines printed on beautiful like heavy stock paper. That was also something to think about, like with the zine community. There's more were more similar to my production methods. Like I wasn't printing large scale books with spines. There was no spines involved. So, you know, what were my options? Like this is really nice, heavy stock, black and white, quite short, A4. This is risograph printing, which I considered for a very short time, but then realized it was very hard to print brown, and I'm very particular that I should be printed brown in my comics. But this is amazing risograph printing, and also very experimental style of, I don't know if you want to call it comics or illustration, but it's a really beautiful story written in a very unusual way, and also presented like so uniquely. I think the zine community really taught me that I could do anything I wanted, and that was fine. I love seeing all the diversity of production and like themes and artistic styles. I think it drove me more to develop my own style rather than try to take from other people's styles. So yeah, I also want to say that I love embroideries. I love that there's no panels. I love the simple drawings of women in this as well, and I really like the story. I think I like quite simple things. I've become a bit overwhelmed by like lots of panelled, lots of writing pages. This I find a bit more digestible for whatever reason. This one's also great. It's Indian mythology but in comic form. Really painterly comics. I started using watercolors in about 2017, 2018. That was very new to me. But I don't think I've experimented enough, but I definitely want to explore more expressive looking comics. So yeah, I think that's what I want to say. That's all. It's all been very rewarding, very validating. I think the other thing about other comic artists is having the community of people there to like share it with, because after all this has mostly been a hobby for me. It's not been my career, so having those spaces to like feel joy about what I was making was so important, and I really wouldn't be here if not for those spaces. I wonder how long I would have done it if it was just me drawing in my room just for fun. Maybe I would have. It is a catharsis, as we mentioned, but yeah, thank God for comics people, zine people, illustration people, zine fairs, comics conferences, indie comics, because yeah, they inspired me. Not directly necessarily, but yeah, in the ways that I hopefully have explained in a somewhat coherent way. Welcome to the mind of a British Indian 20-something navigating the 21st century. Or maybe it should be... Okay, wait, I'll do it again. Welcome to the mind of a British Indian 20-something trying to navigate the 21st century. think that's it. I think I'm looking forward to my comics having a spine, because right now, you know, they don't, you can't put them like that and see them. And actually, a friend of mine pointed it out to me that, you know, they've bought all my comics, but it doesn't have that bookshelf swag. I want some bookshelf swag, is what I'm excited about. Yeah, that's the only thing about zines, you know, they kind of lie flat and you don't know which one's which. So I'm excited about the spine and taking some pictures of like nice bookshelves. I hope people will do that. Like, ooh, FML Comics next to Ursula Le Guin and Zadie Smith. That would be my, if you could, if someone would, no, I don't think that's probably not the right place. But you know, something nice would be cool.